Hello and welcome to this Carolan Cymru revision session. This video will be looking at the GCSE History course and specifically the subject of crime and punishment. The focus of this video will be the subject of crime and punishment from the perspective of Wales. I'm sure that your teacher will have explained to you that the Welsh perspective is really important in this exam, and there will be a number of questions in the exam where you will not have access to the higher band marks without referring to the Welsh perspective in each of the periods of history. So, crime and punishment from 1500 to the present day. During the 1500s, crimes such as heresy and treason were the most serious crimes. The crime of heresy, which is when someone changes religion or disagrees with the religion followed by the king or queen or ruler of the country. And the crime of treason, which is where someone betrays the king or queen or ruler of the country, were very serious crimes. So both these things, heresy and treason, were very serious crimes. In Wales, people such as Rawlins White, Richard Gwyn and John Penry were killed because of their religious beliefs. People were not free to believe what they wanted to believe at that time. Smuggling in Wales. In the 1700s, smuggling was very common. Smuggling was big business along the coastline of Wales. Think about that coastline and how much of Wales has a coastline rather than a border, and consider the opportunities that this provided to those who wanted to be smugglers. If you get a chance, take a look at the map using Google Maps, for example, to see just how ideal Wales was for smuggling. The Gower, Pembrokeshire and even Cardigan Bay were famous for smuggling. People smuggled alcohol and other goods to avoid paying the high taxes that were in force. Urbanisation and crime. In the 1800s, towns such as Merthyr Tydfil started to grow very big, and slums such as the China area of Merthyr began to appear, and there was a lot of poverty and crime in these areas. China was a nickname for one particular area of Merthyr that had such a bad name for crime that even the police were scared to go there to deal with the problems and the crime that was committed there. Many people at this time moved to towns from rural areas, but life was very hard and they often turned to crime. In the 1800s, many protests took place. So this talks about protests and public order. There were protests in Newport and Llanidloes in 1839. The Chartists were calling for more voting rights. In rural areas, the Rebecca riots were happening, where men dressed as women attacked toll gates and people wanted change. So as you see, it wasn't only in urban areas that protests were taking place, but also in rural areas. Poverty was prevalent in both urban and agricultural regions. Modern direct action. Now, the 1900s saw events such as the investiture bombings in 1968-69 and the activities of Meibion Glyndŵr in the 80s and 90s, who were campaigning for Welsh land and culture. This idea of Welsh identity was very important politically during this period, and there was an increase in campaign groups like Meibion Glyndŵr, also the group known as MAC, Mudiad am Ddiffyn Cymru, Welsh for Movement for the Defence of Wales. Such groups began to protest in a more extreme way, often using violence to spread their message or to scare those that opposed them. MAC was a paramilitary Welsh nationalist organisation which was responsible for a number of bombing incidents between 1963 and 1969. The group's activities primarily targeted infrastructure carrying water to the English city of Liverpool. There are specific examples that you can use in your exams of terrorism happening in Wales, on Welsh land, by Welsh people. That's a very important factor to remember. Fighting against crime, the law and the police. So at the start of the 1500s, people were still following many laws from the time of Hywel Dda. Following the Acts of Union, English law enforcement came into Wales, and in the 1800s, town and county police forces were established in Wales, such as South Wales Police. By the end of the 1800s, the police units had joined forces to create larger units. So in the exam, you can refer to the laws of Hywel Dda, the Acts of Union, where the laws of England became enforceable in Wales. That provides you with an example of events in Wales for your exam, especially the last question on the paper. Community punishment and policing. In the past, punishments such as the wooden horse or Scottish cattle were ways of disgracing people who had broken the rules. The wooden horse, ceffyl pren in Welsh, refers to a practice where an offender, often accused of adultery, wife-beating, or refusing to marry a pregnant woman, was tied to a wooden frame or ladder and paraded through the village. In industrial areas, a vigilante group known as Scottish Cattle sent out gangs to punish those who had worked during a strike. The Scottish Cattle would dress in disguise and visit the homes of blackleggers or strike breakers. They would blow horns and rattle chains, then break doors and smash furniture in the house. If people resisted, they would be beaten. Both these forms of public punishment and humiliation happened up to the 1840s. Does community punishment happen today? Have a think about how people are punished today to see whether community punishment is something that exists. Now, I'll give you a minute to think about that and to compare today against the period up to the 1840s. Executions and punishment. In this period, public executions were used. There were public execution locations across Wales, such as in Beaumaris, Carmarthen and Cardiff. The Rowth area of Cardiff is famous for being a place where a large number of people were executed during this period. Execution was even used in the 1900s. Stocks were also used in Wales as a form of punishment. Criminals would sit or stand at a wooden frame and the local people would throw rotten food or even stones at them, with the last recorded incident taking place in Newcastle Emlyn in 1872. You may have studied examples of famous people who were executed in other countries, but you can also study details of executions that happened in Wales. The last man executed for murder at HMP Cardiff was Mahmoud Matan in 1952. He was wrongly convicted of murdering a shopkeeper, Lily Volpert, and the conviction was later overturned in 1998. The authorities apologised for this case of injustice, and it was very likely that racism had played a part in this man being blamed and executed for the murder. So do use these Welsh examples in your exam. Prisons and reform. John Howard in the 1770s was a major figure in the prison reform movement, and his work significantly impacted the prison system, including the system in Wales. Howard's book, The State of the Prisons in England and Wales, published in 1777, documented the appalling conditions that he witnessed in prisons across the country, including those in Wales. There is sufficient evidence to prove that he visited jails to see the appalling conditions firsthand. New jails were built in Wales in the 1800s. Beaumaris in 1830, Cardiff in 1832, Swansea in 1861. The first Pentonville-style prison was built in Ruthin in 1866-68. This Pentonville-style prison served as a model for prisons across Britain. It housed prisoners in isolated cells as per the Pentonville model, which emphasized separation and repetitive labor. Then moving forward to the 1900s, new prisons based on an open prison model were built, such as the one in Prescoed in 1939. So use the context and your knowledge of the development and evolution of prisons and how people such as Elizabeth Fry had an influence on prison reform. She was highly critical of the conditions found in prisons, and she was a major driving force behind new legislation to improve the treatment of prisoners, especially female inmates. Use your knowledge about prison reform to talk about prisons in Wales in order to meet the Welsh perspective requirements. So it's clear that crime and punishment has changed a lot over the centuries, from the wooden horse to modern policing. History shows how society has developed and how crime has developed on the basis of that. Okay, so that's the end of the content on America in the 1920s. Let's talk a bit about other revision resources that are out there for you. The WJC Resources website includes modules that take you through the course section by section. They are extremely useful resources that include not only the content and information that you need to learn for the exams, but also tasks that guide you through the course and that will help you to develop a variety of skills that you need for this qualification. And of course, you can look at these on your laptop, your tablet or iPad or your phone, so there's no excuse not to revise. You can do so on the bus, on the way home, for example, by just accessing these resources on your phone. They are very easy to discover. You can find them on Google very easily, but if you have problems finding the WJC Resources website, do ask your history teacher, who will be really familiar with this website and will be able to show you exactly which section of the website is appropriate for you and for what you're studying, or where you can find sections of units that are appropriate to what you've been doing in class. There are also the WJC revision books available in the shops. These are also a really valuable resource for revision. Not only do these books include the course content, but they also include examples of exam questions, which are going to be really useful for your revision for the exams. The best way to prepare for exams is to practice exam questions. Practice, practice, and more practice. Practice the things that are expected by the examiner and practice timing. Practicing the types of questions that appear in the exams. You won't know which questions are going to come up in the exams, of course, but you can familiarize yourselves with the appearance of the paper and what it looks like. That is, question 1 is this type of question every time, question 2 is this type of question each time, and so on. I recommend that you start at the end of the exam and work your way back, because you can lose a lot of marks by not reaching the final questions. Missing some of the early questions won't mean a huge loss of marks. Of course, the ideal is that you complete all questions, but by beginning at the back and working your way back towards the front, you make sure that you're not losing big chunks of marks. The BBC Bite Size is also a useful website and a different way to revise. These days, you can ask the website to read out what is written, so you can easily listen to the questions being spoken on your phone while wearing headphones or AirPods. And last but not least is the Carlam Cymru website, of course. You will find a wealth of revision videos for most of your GCSE subjects on the Carlam Cymru website, and also for your A-level subjects from next year onwards if you decide to go on to further study. The only other thing to say is all the best with your revision and the very best of luck for the exams. Bye.